Okay, this is my first YouTube video. It's a response to stroke rebuttal of Chris van Tulleken's recent Channel 4 podcast interview concerning ultra-processed food. I will just begin by saying that although I'll be mentioning the names of companies like Weetabix or Heinz, Kellogg's and so forth, during the course of the video, I'm in no way affiliated with any of them and have not received any payment or other form of sponsorship. So, without further ado, during the podcast, Chris van Tulleken describes human beings as obligate processivores, or something similar, meaning that they have to process some of their food at least to a greater or lesser extent before they can eat it. However, he also neglects, unfortunately, to state that before then, and at a far more fundamental level, human beings are obligate herbivores. And this is important because any advice or literature concerning diet and nutrition that does not fully understand and accept this fact is not only worthless, but actually harmful. I think that he is also, in the course of the interview, appeared to be employing a rather superficial, broad brush methodology whereby anything processed is bad and anything less so is good, without paying any attention to the intrinsic qualities and makeup of the items concerned. And in truth, the comparisons that he was drawing or making between processed foods and their less processed equivalent are only valid if the starting point is something that is already a healthy human whole plant food. Potatoes are a case in point. A plain boiled or baked potato is wholesome and extremely nourishing and naturally tasty. Its bastardized ultra-processed food counterpart, a handful of Pringles, is not. So there is a clear and fundamental qualitative nutritional difference between the two things. However, the same cannot be said when comparing butter and margarine or an organic grass-fed steak with a McDonald's hamburger patty, because none of those are actual human food. The pat of butter, for example, I'm taking the pat of butter, in fact, it's highly processed, with virtually all of the other constituents of the milk stripped away, leaving you with nothing more than a glob of saturated fat with some trans fats present as well, because these occur naturally in the stomachs of rudiments. They're not only produced in margarine factories. And that will destroy your cardiovascular system, it will assist in the initiation and development of many forms of cancer, and it will make you very fat. So butter is not just as bad for you as margarine, it's demonstrably even worse, and its production is far more environmentally damaging. Equally, there's no qualitative nutritional difference between an organic steak and the hamburger patty. They're both made up of the same inflammatory animal protein. They both contain the same NEU5GC, saturated fat, dietary cholesterol. They both form the same bacterial endotoxins and heterocyclocamines during cooking, and they both result in the production of trimethylamine oxide, which forms as a result of the body trying to metabolize them. And they both cause exactly the same physiological and environmental damage. So in sum, it appears to me that what he's saying fundamentally is something like this. If your mother, who loves you, grows some tobacco at home and then hand rolls the manually shredded tobacco leaves into a cigar, that is not only less damaging to your health than a commercially produced cigarette made by a corporation whose only goal is to separate you from your money, but it somehow may be actually beneficial to you, and that's farcical. Not least because it ignores the fact, as alluded to earlier, that regardless of which one of the two you smoke, it's the inhalation of the tobacco fumes itself that's killing you, destroying your lungs and your cardiovascular system. And the added carcinogenic agents present in the packet of Marlboro are only helping that process along. He makes a similar error, I think, when discussing the World Health Organization's classification of processed meat as a group 1 carcinogen, which it certainly is, while appearing to ignore the fact that they also classify unprocessed red meat, and that could be the organic grass-fed beefsteak, as a group 2 carcinogen. So in other words, they'll both kill you. It's just that the processed meat will do it a little more quickly. So again, there is no more a qualitative nutritional difference between a sirloin steak and a Big Mac than there is between the homegrown hand-rolled cigarette and its industrially produced equivalent. They are both precisely the same basic toxins. Therefore, it's not, I think, the cornflakes or the Weetabix that's the problem, but the huge increase in the consumption of animal products of all descriptions that is responsible for the parlous and worsening state of not only public but planetary health. His argument, such as it is, seems to me to be not a great deal more than yet another transparent attempt by an apologist for the meat and dairy industries to shift the blame for this state of affairs from themselves to someone else by saying that it's all the fault of Kellogg's or Heinz or Weetabix, which is a travesty. It's a similar methodology of misrepresentation as that employed by the tobacco industry with their now infamous "doubt is our product" memo. And even if something like butter can be described as more natural by comparison with product X, so what? I mean, a tornado's natural, and so is the neurotoxin found in cobra venom. Does that naturalness somehow make the cobra venom desirable? I wouldn't say that. He also advances the supposed long history of the production of dairy goods as a defense of same. Well, warfare has a long history too, and that doesn't make it in any way desirable. And finally, this idea that butter is somehow a natural product. No, of course, it's an absolute contrivance. You won't find a butter-bearing tree any more than you'll find the hamburger patch infamously used by McDonald's as an advertising gimmick during the 70s and 80s. And in addition to that, the amount of time that has elapsed since people began milking cows or other herd animals is as nothing compared to the length of time that we've spent eating plants. So if we then make a direct comparison between butter, say, or eggs, which he also cites as a natural product, with, for example, baked beans or some Weetabix, what do we actually find? Well, the butter and the eggs are basically just saturated fat, dietary cholesterol, and animal protein, all of which are highly damaging to human biology. They contain no dietary fiber, they contain no antioxidants or phytonutrients, and virtually nothing in the way of vitamins. A tin of baked beans or some Weetabix, by contrast, do contain dietary fiber along with resistant starches, healthy proteins, phytonutrients, some antioxidants, complex carbohydrates, and they're comparatively calorically dilute. And that's also, that last point is also because the fats they contain are not added, and or they're as the result of some kind of refining processes with butter. They exist in those foods naturally, present in the right concentrations and the relative proportions to support human health. And as far as the ingredients go, Weetabix is just whole wheats with some sugar, a bit of salt, fortified with a few added vitamins and minerals, while those in the baked beans are not very far away from what you would use if you were to make them from scratch at home. And once again, the environmental impact caused by the production of the beans and the Weetabix is but a tiny fraction of that which results from the production of animal-derived foods mentioned above. Even the packaging of the beans and the Weetabix is completely recyclable. I think a further point is that consumption of something like dairy products is about as unnatural a behavior as you can get. Any mammal that is weaned has no business whatsoever continuing to consume milk of any kind or anything derived from it, far less when the source is another species. I mean, he's basically recommending that everyone continue to breastfeed for the rest of their lives, and from a cow's udder at that. You know, I'm quite sure that last time anybody checked, human beings were not classified as bovines. And he also touches more than once on the idea that ultra-processed foods are physiologically or neurologically addictive. And while that's certainly the case, he's also saying that the products like the butter and so on, the consumption of which he advocates, are not. And that is simply factually incorrect. cheese and other dairy products, like the milk that was used to make them, are sources of casomorphines, which are opiates. They're chemically in the same class as heroin or morphine or a drug like Demerol. They're formed during the process of digestion, they pass through the blood-brain barrier, and they attach to the same neurological receptors as those utilized by heroin. And there are no opiates or anything resembling them to be found in a tin of baked beans or a packet of Weetabix or a loaf of supermarket bread, provided it hasn't had any milk added to it. And finally, his point about the conflict of interest inherent in health charities accepting money from corporations which make products that cause the very diseases that said charities are supposed to be combating is nothing new. And it was made, I think, with considerably more authority some time ago by Kip Anderson in What the Health. In closing, I thought it might be humorous to remark on Krishnan Gurumurthy's line in the same interview when he was talking about the prevalence of processed goods in industrialized societies, and he was saying that everything is processed. This is processed, that is processed, our phones are processed. Well, of course they are. Since when has there been such a thing as a naturally occurring telephone? Oh yeah. And then, yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought a bit there. But anyway, that's it. That's my first video. Hope you liked it. If you did, good. If you didn't, well, you didn't. And there may be another one at some point. Until then, bye for now.